So the news story I'd like to speak on today comes from LifeSite News, and it's about this young lady. The title says, "Exclusive Sexual Assault Survivor Says Remigration is the only serious long-term solution for women's safety." So let's find out what she's talking about. When the fear of being called racist becomes stronger than the duty to protect women and children, something is deeply broken in our societies. Migrant assault survivor Thaïs de Escufon said. So this is the young lady. And in a moment, I'll read a little bit about what happened to her and what's going on in the actual article. But I want to get very clear on what's happening here. This is a young lady, a French woman, a French European woman who was living in her own city, in her own country, and was assaulted by a migrant. So someone from another country. Usually they're going to be African or Arab. And so she's arguing, and you'll see how she's struggled with this argument, that the only way to stop these assaults on women in particular from happening in Europe is to remigrate. In other words, like in the US, ICE, right? I know there's not much popularity around this idea that Donald Trump has a task force, a police force, a brute force out on the streets, picking up people that actually don't belong here and taking them to their countries. And these are usually violent criminals. These are not people who are contributing to society. These are people who, attack young ladies or have criminal histories. And I'm not saying all. So before I even go further on this, and I know that this is probably already beginning to trigger some people, I want you to understand, my parents are immigrants to America. In fact, like all the Europeans that are here, migrated here. But I'm talking about the establishment of the United States of America in the 1970s. My parents came here. And my father's aunt and his father came first and little by little followed the traditional route of helping all 12, or it was really 10 of them at the time, all of my father's siblings, one at a time, to come to America the right way, meaning they had to go through the various processes and go through the different departments and apply for the different things to finally get here. And my father became a citizen in the 1970s. Of course, there's arguments against why and how that happened, but that's neither here nor there. I'm here because my father and his father made the journey from third world Belize into Brooklyn so that, we could have a better life, which is what America promised. And I remember growing up, my mom telling me about how she grew up in the poor country of Belize, just like my father, and she truly believed that America had streets paved with gold, right? So we have this idealization of America that the whole world sort of holds high for good reason. My grandfather and my parents wouldn't have moved here if there wasn't more opportunity. So by no means am I erasing the fact that, shit sucks in other countries. And we could talk about why that is, particularly with regard to Europe in a moment and, the surrounding countries of Europe. And coming into America, promises a better life if you choose to abide by the virtue, the values of the culture. But here's the thing. We're talking about ICE, and I know some of you guys you probably got your panties in a bunch when I mentioned that, but I understand why. My mother revealed to me just a few years ago that she struggled to get citizenship here in America, and she was afraid that she would get, for a lot of my childhood, she was afraid that she would get deported, and she went through all kinds of hell in order to become an American citizen, losing lots of money to scam artists that took her money and disappeared like she didn't know what to do. My parents, honest, hardworking American immigrants, and my mom couldn't. And so when all this stuff is going on with ICE and they're coming in and they're taking people that do not belong here and getting them out of here with a focus, I believe, and hopefully the facts show, are people who are violent criminals. There are also those that are caught in the crosshairs, and my mother could have been one of them. And if that was the case, maybe I wouldn't be here with you right now. So I understand. My mom still had to go through all of the legal headaches in order to become American. And they thought it important enough to do that. Where I know that there are a lot of people that have come to this country. Now we're talking about America because that's the only way I can relate some of my experiences to what this woman is going through. But of course, she suffers, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. Anyway, the point is that my parents wanted to do it the right way, and my parents were contributing members of the society, and I don't think that's what this woman is referring to, or what a lot of what's going on in terms of immigration and immigration enforcement is talking about. Well, this young lady, so I highlighted a little bit of her story here. I'm not even sure if I can get it to show the full screen, but I'll read what I have here. So just briefly, this young lady was assaulted by a Tunisian man who had entered her home on December 18th, 2023. D'Escuffon stated during a television interview for the French channel that immigration represents one of the greatest threats to the safety of French women. And for this reason, she was prosecuted for incitement of racial hatred. So this woman who was attacked in her own home, and I highlighted more parts of the story, but I'm just going to go with what I remember here because I don't want to read from the screen as I'm learning how to do this, this sort of news recap thing. She was sexually assaulted, and then the man left, and she went to the police, and nothing happened. And they were like, oh, that kind of sucks. And they actually even tried to say that she was a whiner, right? Like she's trying to create bad things. So let's see. Let's read a little bit more about this. He took my phone, kept me inside our apartment for a long time. Situation gradually turned to an explicit sexual demand. I was terrified. I managed to make him leave and call the police. I later recognized him on surveillance footage, but the case was nevertheless dismissed. During that interview, I said the main danger for women in France comes from immigrant men, African, black, and Arab men. It's just the truth, right? I mean, just because a truth is uncomfortable doesn't make it not a truth, and the truth should set us free. We want to know what the truth is. But anyway, these words were later treated as a criminal offense. She was prosecuted, and the prosecutor sought a 4-month unsuspended prison sentence against her. So now she's going to jail. She's going to jail as a result of the words that she used to describe the situation that she was in. Now, I want to turn this story around and begin to talk about the roots of why society, in particular Europe, but all of Western civilization, is now struggling with the revelation that this is not a good idea, and trying to offer a deeper understanding as to how we got here. And it's so nuanced, or it's multifaceted, but I'm just going to shoot from the top of my head. So Europe is better than the surrounding countries. In other words, it's better to be in Europe, in France, than it would be to be in Africa. That's just a statement of fact. There would probably be less corruption in the government. I'm just assuming. I don't know Tunisia, but I know that a lot of these third world countries, they're very corrupt. It doesn't mean that Western nations aren't corrupt, but the corruption is pretty bad there, and it may cause people to want to leave. There are less opportunities. There's less amenities. There's more crime, right? There's more bad stuff in these countries than there would be in Europe. Now, I spoke to you in a previous video about how in order for communism, which we're moving into like a global communist situation, whether you like it or not, these are facts. Can we fight it? I don't know. Should we fight it? I don't know. But if we look at what's going on, communism is growing. Communism didn't fade away with the fall of the Berlin Wall. Communism didn't go away. It was just exported and spread and became more insidious. It's under the guise of different things, different names, but what we're experiencing most poignantly is this World Economic Forum or United Nations, these oligarchical, non-government organization conglomerates that are pushing for globalization. Why is globalization important, and what does it have to do with communism? Well, if you're going to control the entire globe, You're going to control, and this is essentially what, there's a small percentage of people, a small faction of people in the planet. I remember watching like Pinky and the Brain when I was a kid on Looney Tunes, and there was can we take over the world? We're going to take over, all bad guys, right? We're going to take over the world. I'm going to rule the world. Everybody wants to rule the world. Well, we got guys that's like legit. That's what they're trying to do. They want to rule the world. And if you're going to rule the world, you have to level the playing field for everyone. Because if there are too many outliers, ideological outliers, behavior outliers, if there are just too many people that have minds of their own, you're not going to be able to control them. So you need to homogenize the entire world. You got to get everybody on level playing fields. We have become corporate beings. We're just like when you go to a McDonald's, you know what you're going to get with McDonald's, no matter if you're in Japan or if you're in Miami. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you go in America. If you go to a Walmart, you know what the Walmart's going to be. And that because it's predictable, and when something's predictable, it's reproducible. When you can reproduce predictable results, you have control. This is why the franchise model, right? I use McDonald's because it was one of the first to like develop this franchise model, is so powerful. You create a standardization, and with that standardization, you now have predictability, which gives better control. You saw it with the pandemic. After generations of unfolding this communistic mindset in the minds and hearts of the people, we're all there. Whether you think you're not or you're not, if you went to American public schools, if you watch American media movies, if you read the news, if you watch the news in the West, anywhere, this has been propaganda that has been propagated in your freaking brain. You couldn't get away from it. Can't get away from it. And so this standardization allows world rulers to be able to control a lot better. This is why schools are so important, right? This is the idea of lateral generations are brand new. There was no such thing as lateral generations. There was vertical integration. In other words, we related more prior to this century, right, the 20th century, with the advent of public schools as they are. Schools would have like small children and then all the way up to older children. It was vertical. You'd have a schoolhouse and you'd have all the kids. And so with the toppling of that, turning that sideways, which is it's communistic. Once again, for something to be common, which is the word communist, you hear the word and you think automatically, the Soviet Union, but I'm saying like from the term of the word, communist, commune, communion, common. For us to be common, they needed to remove this vertical integration. And what that vertical integration used to also do was cause like children to look to their parents and their grandparents. And we were more like the people upstream than we were people laterally. But the idea of creating schools has lateralized our communion. So that now there's generations. And being in, I'm 47 years old. I've watched this enough times. I'm starting to see what they do. Each generation, it's almost like there's a new thing for the generation. And only that there's new language, there's new clothes, there's new music. And they keep trying to create new things for these generations, but they just keep repeating themselves. So like what was old is new. And so you almost see that this pattern, you're starting to have pattern recognition. You start to notice, okay, what they're doing and where we're going. But that's neither here nor there. We're talking about this young lady and how this leveling of the playing field and the homogenization of the world has lended itself to a situation where this young lady who is calling out a legitimate threat is persecuted because of her calling out, basically saying the emperor has no clothes. She's calling out the obvious. And I think more and more people, especially in Europe, because they get it pretty bad over there because of their proximity to Africa and the Arab countries, they're starting to speak out. And they've had it the worst because communism started there. They've had it the worst. And the most insidious form of this communism is self-censorship. When they can get you so afraid to speak the truth that when you're afraid to speak the truth, they've totally got you. That's when you are under the greatest ideological subversion ever. When you deny what you already, like, if somebody shows you a pink elephant and you're like, nope, 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 it's a gray elephant. It's a gray elephant. Nope, I don't see a pink elephant. I don't see a pink elephant. When you deny, when you ignore what you see with your eyes in order to adopt the narrative, the job's done. That's what I was talking about. I was talking about the pandemic. We saw it with the pandemic, right? They knew that based on Pavlov's theory, right? Once you get the dogs trained, all you gotta do is ring the bell and they're gonna do what you want them to do. We're trained by the news. We're trained by the media. We're trained by authorities. And it happened for so many generations, right? At least 4 generations were into this, that they knew that when they ring the bell, what? Fear, pandemic, war, whatever it is, we're all going to, in unison, like the global homogenized filthy masses that we are, fall in line, fall in step, and do what they want us to do. That was a test, and they won. Who knows what's going to happen next? Because a lot of people are waking up. But that was the peak of it, and it demonstrated the power that communism has over the world. The problem with communism isn't being in common. The problem with communism is who's pulling the strings. Who's pulling the strings? And what are their desires? What do they have in mind for us? Now, there's a lot going on here, and I can't speak about communism without speaking about feminism, because truly communism is birthed out of feminism. You might think that because it's in, it's more of a global ideal, right? Because men, women, black, white, doesn't matter. The communism is unfolded over the course of everyone. It starts with feminism. It starts with feminism and it started in the garden. Let me back up for a moment. So the enemy knows that in order to control, you got to separate, right? Divide and conquer. And the most evident separation, the most universal separation amongst humans is male-female. Black and white is not as different as male and female, right? Preferences, cultures, things are different, but human beings are generally the same. But men and women that's the first difference, right? We both come from each other and then we separate. And Satan in the garden understood that if he could create a bigger wedge between the two by manipulating the woman, he could control the situation. And that's exactly what he did. He understood by delighting the woman with sensual gratification, meaning appealing to her feelings and her desires, he could get more easily, notice he went to her, more easily manipulate her and unseat her from the ground of truth, from the ground of honor, from the ground of reality. Women are much more easily ungrounded from reality. A woman's reality is what she feels and what she thinks, and she will justify it to her death. It's just her nature. It doesn't matter. It's not a judgment right or wrong. Men are more honorable. Men, in our nature, and I'm not talking about the extremes, I'm not talking about perversions, I'm talking about just our general nature. A woman is more emotional, and the facts are subservient to feelings for her. For men, feelings are subservient to facts. It's just the way we are. So the serpent, i.e. the enemy who is alive and present with us here today, understands that if you can separate the woman from the man, get her on her own, right? Like Satan whispered in Eve's ear while her husband was there. You got to lure her away and give her perceived power. She will make decisions against her own good. She will hurt herself. And that's exactly what happened in the garden. It's exactly what's happening now. And this young lady she is a victim, she is definitely a victim of this flood of migration, but she's more a victim of who voted for that. Who votes for that? Who votes for globalism? Who votes for open borders? Right? Who votes with their hearts, not their minds? Women. And this is why for many generations, or at least, since the founding of like democratic societies, women didn't vote. Women didn't vote. A woman's vote was with her husband, and a woman's vote was with her children. She has the capacity to move society greater than any vote could possibly do by raising her children in a way that's virtuous and building families, not just bearing children out of wedlock. But anyway, so feminism in the 20th century, it started in Seneca Falls in the late 1800s, proposed that a woman should be separated from her man in the vote. And by separating, because my belief is that one family, one vote. One family, one vote. It's not that the man votes and the woman doesn't. It's we got to get together and we got to agree on something here. And if we're going to agree to make a decision that's going to affect the entire society, it must be rooted in fact. It must be rooted in reason. It can't be rooted in feeling. We won't see things like open borders and like the situation that this young lady is in. So, I'm not blaming her, obviously. I'm not blaming women in general. It's the enemy that I'm blaming, but it's because women vote. Women vote. Women voted for this in America and in Europe. Women vote for open borders, and the reason why they vote for open borders is because their hearts are soft for the pain and the suffering of people outside of the nicer places, first world, right? I'm here living in the lap of luxury in America and Europe, and there are people in other countries nearby that are suffering, children who are not eating, crime, corruption, all kinds of bad shit. If I think with my heart first, it's like it's like there are homeless people outside, right? I don't know these people from Adam, but I'm going to open my door. I'm going to leave my door open. I'm going to say, you and all your friends, yeah, you guys can come in here. Listen, you don't have to follow any of my rules. You can eat whatever you want from my refrigerator, and you can go and sleep in my daughter's beds with her anytime you want. That's not compassionate, that's retarded. But a man wouldn't do that because he's going to think long term. He's going to think about the consequences of his action. Women don't necessarily think about the consequences of their action. They think about what is right in the moment. The truth is what feels right in the moment. And so women voted for this, but now that the cat is out the bag, now that the monster is unleashed, now that we're facing the dragon at the door, we're seeing the consequences of these actions. And this young lady, she's suffering from it because she's pointing out, look, maybe we shouldn't have done this. Maybe this is not a good idea. Maybe I wouldn't have been sexually assaulted if we would have maintained masculine boundaries. Men are boundary driven. Men by our nature create and push boundaries. To allow the border to be opened is literally an invasion. It's an invasion. It's not being nice. It's not being kind. It's not being charitable at all. It's being careless. And when you speak out about it, like this young lady does, she spoke out about it. She's going against the narrative. She's now the bad guy. You are now the bad guy, young lady. How dare you say that? So where do we go from here? We understand at this point that this is a spiritual battle. Like I said, it started in the garden. It has a lot to do with our poor judgment between good and evil, but more importantly, more poignantly, following the judgment of Eve, following the judgment of women. So what I propose is a return to patriarchy. Not the matriarchy that we live in right now and the matriarchy that's unfolding that is allowing global communism to unfold. The communists understand, the globalists understand that you need to have more of a homogenized, feminized society for them to unfold their demise, do the things that they're doing. Patriarchy, which was prior to this, global communist takeover that we're dealing with, Patriarchy had everything to do with protection. A father, where we get the word patriot, right? Only objective. And if you think of it, not even just in terms of, patriarchy, matriarchy, but man and woman, a man's primary duty, but also the calling of his heart and the deepest seated sentiment from which he does everything is to provide and to protect. We love women so much that we want to protect them and provide for them. And everything that we do, everything that we build, like I'm watching this documentary about the frontier, American frontier, and Daniel Boone and Lewis and Clark and like these guys that like ventured west. All of the desire for expansion and for opportunity and wealth was for what? They wanted to provide a greater opportunity for civilization, and civilization is designed to protect and provide for women, because where there are women, there is the future. Patriarchy is not against women. When patriarchy ensues, there's higher birth rates, there's greater expansion, there's more love when men take the lead. That's why in the Bible it says, women, respect your husband, husband, love your wife. There's more love. If you allow the love to pour through the masculine attitude, through the masculine sentiment, through the truth about masculinity, which is all about giving. Men give, we sacrifice, we give. Just look at the sexual act. What do you guys, when you think about sex and you're like, oh, I got sex, you're thinking about it from the feminist perspective. You didn't get anything. You gave your life force. You filled up with so much love that you gave your essence. That's why you feel tired when you're done. That's what we want to do. And we want to create environments so that could be the case. So we know it's a spiritual battle at its core, and it's meant to pervert the most intimate and primary of all bonds between men and women. And that perversion, that separation, and then the giving disordered power to women in society has led to this poor young lady, where she's not protected. She's not protected by her government. She's not protected by the men. I mean, I don't even know why she was living by herself. She looks very young. I don't want to judge, but like, I got to wonder, like, where is her dad too? Because that was a big part of this. The communist takeover was remove the father from the home. Man, I could go on and on about the sexual revolution and how it perverts the family, and destroys sexual union. But the bottom line is we're here. I see good things unfolding. I only see good things unfolding. I see all of this as shadows to distract us from the truth, and the truth always prevails. Just like they say, the truth is like a lion. Once it's unleashed, you don't have to protect it. You don't have to prove it. And the truth is coming out. And the liars that have been purveying society, the liars who have been manipulating society, the liars who have enacted this ideological subversion that begins with feminism. It all begins, and I'm not against women. I got 3 daughters. But we got to understand that that is the root of the evil that causes things like this. Most evils. Woman worship is coming to an end. It's so exposed at this point because of what? Social media or whatever. Books that were once obscure are becoming more mainstream. So many experts on it. When I started speaking out against feminism and this communist stuff 10 years ago, I lost a lot of followers. A lot of people were against me. A lot of people didn't understand what I was saying. Men and women hated me because I couldn't help myself but to speak out about what I could see that most people couldn't. But now, every time I flip, maybe it's the algorithm, but every time I flip through a social media account, platform, I'm seeing people talking out against it. I'm seeing people talk about it. I usually just happen to be ahead of my time. So if you ever want to know what's going to be happening, listen to me. If you ever want to know what's coming, listen to me. And what's coming, and which is actually very evident right now, is a repatriarchization. She says we need to do a remigration. Listen, remigration will happen when patriarchs take over. This is why Donald Trump being the exemplary zeitgeist representation of masculinity. I'm not saying that he's perfect. I'm not saying I like a lot of shit he's doing. I'm not saying anything, but he does represent masculine virtue. Has ice. Women don't like it until their rapist is remigrated. And we're seeing that all throughout Europe. It wasn't just this lady in France. It's happened in all the places. Happens here. When a woman finally gets hurt, you would think that like the society, you think that the government would be like wanting to protect the women, but they're not. They're wanting to protect their globalist takeover by creating homogenization. They would have been very happy if this black guy made babies with this white girl. This is a part of what they want. I'm a mixed man, so it might sound crazier than ever coming from me. But what they want is homogenized racial, homogenized religion. They want one world religion. They want one gray, monotonous, homogenized race of people that they can very easily manipulate and control. But I think their plans are being thwarted. And many and more people are coming to this awareness, and I don't think it's going to be as easy as they think it would be to take over the world. So that's it. That's all. That's my opinion on that and this little girl, and I hope that she continues her fight. And a part of what she says here is that I think she's a part of this. She's a political activist and generation identity. I think it's important for Europeans. I think it's important for white people to recapture their identity. Everybody has a fucking identity except white people, because it has been beaten out of you. It's been shamed out of you. But it's coming back. I watched the World Cup, this big Viking dude on Norway. I'm so proud to see this guy just like destroying everybody. Big white dude. I don't think he's alone. I think Europe is probably littered, and I don't know if that's the right word, but it's just crawling with the sentiment of these masculine men, ex-Vikings and Huns and warriors that want to fucking come out. That's the most dangerous thing that the globalists can hear. And then maybe that's why they put pink shoes on the Viking. Anyway, that's it. That's all. I'm done. Go check out the pink shoes. It's crazy.